Welcome to Outside the Box with Asendia USA, a podcast educating US-based e-tailers on international shipping topics and how they can expand their global e-commerce footprint.
Yeah, hi everybody. This is John Walsh again here with my partner Nick Agnetti. We're excited to bring the second in series of our podcast called Outside the Box, focusing on e-commerce shipping in North America to and from Canada. Within Canada today is our main topic. We have a special guest joining us today, Dave Mays, CEO of Broadreach, an Asendia company, for this part of our conversation. Before we get into the main topic, I just want to give a little brief bio on Dave. Dave brings 2 years of dedicated experience in cross-border e-commerce logistics with a specific experience in developing best-in-class solutions for retailers selling to Canada. Dave has a wealth of knowledge and had the opportunity to work with Dave over the last 2 years. Dave has a wealth of knowledge about Canada that's, I think, unsurpassed, right, Nick, and anybody else other than that, quite frankly, by far, right? He has a special focus on market-leading cross-border with a special focus on U.S. to Canada. Although Dave will talk about, he has also the ability with his product offering to do intra-Canada, which I think is something that is important to remind all our customers about as well. Dave works with us closely on all our opportunities working on Canada. Dave's background and knowledge has been paramount to our success of growing our business in Canada. Hello, everyone, and let's see if Dave can introduce himself. Dave?
Hello, everyone. Did you say 2 years or 23 years?
20 years. I'm sorry, 20 years.
Right, something like that. So, well, Dave, let me just jump in real quick. Hello, everybody. It's Nick Agnetti. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day and month. And so with Dave on, Dave is the best resource I've ever encountered when it comes to Canada. So I'm very excited that he's on with us today, not only to talk about, Asendia's northbound service option with our DDP network into Canada, but just the Canadian delivery market in general and what he's been doing, he and his team, the optimizations they've been doing and just really helping to improve delivery options into the nation of Canada. So Dave, let's take it away. And
Dave, one of the topics we want to talk to you about was when you get on the phone or Teams or whatever we're interacting with our client, you always talk about a lot of the challenges that you see of e-commerce shipping into Canada and intra-Canada. And is there any, like the customer feedback that you've been with us that is standing out more than others that you're seeing as an issue, like clearance, customs, cost, transits, visibility, anything in there that stands out more than others that you wanted to talk about with Star?
I could talk about Canada for 4 hours straight. If you are so inclined to listen for that long. The reality is Canada is physically bolted on in the same continent, right next to us here in the U.S.
Right.
And it is the first, best, next international market for virtually every e-tailer that ships out of the U.S. Once you learn how to identify, create demand, build out the supply chain with partners, and ultimately get those packages delivered, then you start looking at other markets, other continents. The supply chains are very, very different. We can effectively cover Canada over the road or through ground options, anywhere between 1 and 7 business days to 90+% of the country. And there is a similar divide east and west in Canada as there is in the US. About 75%, sometimes 80% of the orders, but about 75% of the population is east of Manitoba. And then the other 25 to 30% of the population is west. E-commerce orders generally, depending on the merchant, you're going to have a little bit lighter delivery profile to Quebec. Quebec is French-speaking. If you create a French-speaking site, you can identify, generate demand, and be highly successful. It's about 23% of the population. We see about 10% of the orders go to Quebec for standard U.S. cross-border shippers. So effectively, that's where that 70-30 comes in. With that being said, between the east and the west are what they call prairies, and that's just, you can see your dog run away for about a week, and you'll still be able to see that's how flat it is, and that's how far. And it's cold, and there's lots of geographic challenges in serving Canada, but there are some pretty interesting profiles related to the population and where they're located. About 80% of the Canadian population is within 100 miles of the U.S. border. But again, if you look at how long that border is, you're still talking about some significant east to west mileage.
What has changed? And you've been in this business a long time with Canada. Has anything changed on a customer focus, or let's take it from a consumer and then maybe from a shipper? There's two different things, right? So from a consumer in Canada, has anything changed in the last 20-some years you've been doing this?
For sure. There's no doubt that the branded, fully integrated B2B retail and B2C couriers in Canada, including the big integrated couriers here, FedEx, UPS. Purolator is the largest integrated courier in Canada. And there was a significant preference for a delivery with any of the large integrated couriers. I think that was a 20-year ago philosophy that has e-commerce has changed, the expectation, residential surcharges, delivery area surcharges. There was lots of surcharges associated with the integrated couriers getting to final mile residential addresses. They have changed for the better, and the market has also changed in terms of the expectation of alternate delivery providers. So technology has really allowed both us as a consolidator and forwarder to provide as good, if not better, tracking experiences than the integrated courier. So we're able to end-to-end not only manage from a communication and transportation standpoint, but the visibility is outstanding, and the customers really know and are comfortable with the expectation of delivery through a delivery partner. Going back to one of your first questions, before we can provide solutions to any of the needs that growing and or already established U.S. retailers would have, it's important to understand whether they're doing business casually or whether they're doing business formally in Canada. And there's a variety of questions that we would ask, get those answers, and then decide which track we're going to talk about solutions for transport, delivery, cost effective, and the like.
That's closer to
So that's the big one.
Clearance, right? That's what you're talking about. Yeah.
It really is. It gets into accounting. It gets into business registration. It gets into provincial registration of taxes. It gets into product registration. It gets into other government departments that might require you to perform certain acts. Agriculture Canada, Health Canada, the Natural Health Product Directorate. So whether we're doing business formally or informally is really the big first question. And if we're doing business informally through what we'll call the courier stream or the casual stream, there are some things that we need to adhere to. You can't exceed 3,300 Canadian per day per order per consignee without exceeding that commercial threshold that we're trying to stay below. Goods cannot be for resale or retail sale. And depending on the product, there's a 90-day supply per order restriction from the casual stream. The import of record in the casual stream is the consignee in Canada, not the shipper. So there's some advantages to that. There's some challenges to that, depending on if you're omnichannel or you just do U.S. e-commerce export.
Dave, I'm going to jump in real quick. So just for everybody listening, I want to reiterate, once Dave gets going, it's hard to get that machine set up in there. And so
he's not as long-winded as you.
I'm not sure about that. I'd say we put each other on the mic and let it ride. But more importantly is when in previous episodes, maybe in the beginning of this one, John might have spoke to it, but when we say Dave is a breadth of knowledge, he knows more about Canada than anybody I've ever come across. And so it's just an absolute asset for us as an organization to have Dave here too. And our goal, this podcast is not necessarily, we're not here to just simply promote Asendia services only, but it's really to inform as well in terms of, if you have Canada's the 11th largest e-commerce market in the world. If you're not doing business in Canada, my question to you from my perspective, and this is more customer facing perspective, is well, why not? And let's start there and figure out whether it's a mind shift thing, if it's a mindset issue, or if it's just something, we don't know if our product can get there. We don't know. Just talk to us about it. We would love to be able to explore those opportunities with you. And more importantly, having Dave in the background of just being able to say, hey, any question I have, I can, ask Dave and his team. I mean, anything. It could be, from as simple as, hey, this is a face wash, to is nitrogen considered an aerosol? And what are your thoughts on us hitting that up with an airplane? Probably not great, but we're still going to ask the question to figure out what we're going to be able to do intra-Canada once we get it across the border, via ground transport. So, Dave, I have a question for you. So one of the big themes that I've been discussing with customers on a customer-facing, meaning talking with the online retailers, the subscription boxes, is the focus of the customer experience. I do want to talk a little bit specifically about what you and your team have created with the Broad Reach Network and how you guys are able to improve the customer experience over, let's say, something like an integrated courier like the FedEx or UPS, or even you mentioned Purolator. Could you talk to that for a couple minutes?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a careful description, and the reason I say that, well, first off, there's no formulas in shipping. There's nothing that's proprietary. There's nothing that we're doing that is an invention of some cutting edge service that no one's going to be able to replicate. But there are some best practices and some things that we do with our transport network. There are some ways that we clear customs, all forward thinking and compliant. There's bond utilization. There's all sorts of cross-dock partner network connecting that we do to achieve the outcome that we have. And we want to continue to describe that. We want to continue to have merchants trust us, and we want to continue to beat the competition in terms of service quality. At the end of the day, we have the fewest number of touches, the fewest miles or kilometers traveled, and the lowest cost, most efficient network after 2 years for US to Canada straight away. Now, some of that is related to our size. We don't have trains, planes, and automobiles that are running all over the North American network like some of the large integrated couriers. We were very surgical. We were very precise in how we set up the network, and we did it based on a post-COVID era, which is, we'll just say things were getting a little bit frothy in there in 21/22. So a very fresh approach. We really focused on middle mile. We focused on middle mile speed. We focused on getting to all the major cities in Canada, whether it's ground or air. We have a fantastic partnership with Air Canada that reaches anywhere between 8 and 12 major cities in Canada for an expedited product that's been very successful. We're working with these alternate delivery providers, moving times around to have preferential service picking up 1-2 days, depending on the province, depending on the U.S. origin shipping point. Again, all end to end in terms of not only custody, but also visibility and transparency for those packages. The customs clearance process, probably don't want to go into too much detail on this because we will definitely bore the listeners, but we have automated it entirely. We have bonded trucks and bonded facilities. We do an electronic release, and anytime there's an inspection, we rifle through what we call, containers that are marked with those parcels. We pull the held parcels, and everything else flows through. So even if there are inspections or holds or delays, it only would affect the small parcels that would be targeted. So we've built operation technology and a system to, we think, compete with even the express carriers. I mean, some of the markets out of the U.S. that we're getting service into Greater Toronto and or Eastern Canada, out of the Northeast in the U.S. are faster than you could get if you actually flew it on a plane that went through Memphis or Louisville and had a delivery by a purple tail or a brown van.
So can you just go into a little further? They were using one of their big integrators, one of the big three, and their clearance process is different than yours. And we explained to the customer, hey, we don't hold the whole shipment. If there's an issue with one of the packages, the other stuff goes through. Can you just dive into that a little bit? Because I think that's something that a lot of customers are unaware of with the big three versus what you're doing.
Yeah, generally speaking, each package clears customs on its own through an integrated courier network. They clear on a courier low value shipment basis.
Right.
They require less data than we do for the clearances that we perform. They have some special arrangement with airports and customs authorities, but at the end of the day, they're highly accountable for each of those packages, and they handle them individually, whether it's having a second customs label or a commercial invoice generated. So it's very expensive for the couriers to handle individual e-commerce parcels going to any country, including Canada. If you ship to Ecuador or you ship to the UK or you ship to Canada with the large integrated couriers, oftentimes they're processing them the same.
Because of that additional cost, that processing that fees and touching it, there's a lot more costs associated with the big three carriers and what they're assessing to the customer, right? That's a big deal.
What the integrated couriers can do on the other side of the coin to some of these exotic international markets is amazing. I really respect their end-to-end infrastructure, the scheduling, the operations, but it's very expensive. It's a lot of overhead that you have to pay for, and there's a lot of processes that are very rigid. And they do have consolidation. UPS, FedEx, DHL e-commerce outside of the DHL Express network, they do run consolidation programs, but they're not as agile, they're not as efficient, they're not as cost effective, they're not as good. So really, you're kind of talking about kind of a canyon. On one side, you have the integrated hot, fast courier service, which is good,
right?
Expensive. We just talked about that. And then you have their version of consolidation. We're much closer in service and service quality to the express courier. In some cases better, again, depending on where we're shipping from and where we're going to in Canada.
One of the things that, we specifically target, right, more of your direct consumer brands, apparel, skincare, health and beauty, nutraceuticals, you name it, shoes, etc. and there's often a mindset out there about, oh, well, we don't ship heavier package weights for over Canada or anywhere international, right? And especially when you look at the, global postal rules and, a 2 kilogram rule, you've got mail class versus parcel class. But that all goes away here with this network. And now it's important to remind the listeners, too, this is an entirely DDP network. So one, our focus with this network is improved customer delivery experience. But what would you say, and, I know this is just speaking to our network, and again, we'll get back to, and we'll continue to highlight Canada, holistically, but in our network, in terms of package weights, do you see any challenges when you, between 1 to 2 pounds versus, let's say, and I know we're breaking this down pretty granular, but 4 to 5, 6 pound packages, any benefits, pluses, minuses, things like that?
There's no doubt that we're going to use different end delivery providers based on their capabilities. The higher the weight and the higher the dimension, the more we're going to use integrated courier partners, some of which we've already mentioned on this podcast. The skull and crossbones kind of scenario for us at this stage in our network would be any one length exceeding 48 inches is really tough. And if you layer on 66 pounds over that is a challenge. And there are some cases where Canada Post is the best option. And we use Canada Post extensively for rural residential apartments and PO boxes. If it's over 37 or 39, I think 39 inches, it has a significant surcharge. 99.5% of the product that we're moving today with this fantastic ramp of volume with Asendia is well within that. Our average weight on a dimensional basis is somewhere between 3 and 4 pounds. Our average weight on an actual gravity weight is 1 to 2 pounds. And I expect that to go up. In my past life, we had higher average weights of parcels. But to be honest, in our transportation network, the efficiency of each of these trucks, we can get anywhere between 6,000 to 10,000 parcels per truck with the current profile of the Asendia client base. And we can really do amazing things when we have that level of efficiency on those trucks, that package count.
I agree.
So I think I don't want to get into moving furniture at any point in the near term here. But moving up the weight and dimensional scale a bit into items that are on average between 5 and 15 pounds and dimensionally between 10 and 25 is absolutely fine. Our network can handle. Our pricing is just as strong in relative terms.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to part 1 of our podcast about Canada.
Stay tuned for part 2.
Be sure to subscribe and download our podcast. If you want to learn more about today's topic, email us at ecommerce.usa@asendia.com. And check back frequently for new discussions on e-commerce shipping to Canada and worldwide.